Well, hello there. Happy Rockin Pop-Up Day. Hi, Gavin. Hi, Graham.
Hey
Hey,
Marisa, happy
Graham.
Rockin Pop-Up Day.
I'm really excited for today's Rockin Pop-Up because we're officially kicking off the Halloween season with this event. As many of you probably know, we love Halloween at the museum, and we've been preparing for our Halloween event for months and months now. That's going to be on October 30th. And Gavin and Graham have been to that before. And Gavin's going to be there for this year's one too on October 30th. What are you going to be doing at the Museum of the Macabre this year, Gavin?
Well, I'll be running a very spooky little, I guess, part of the museum. What do you call it? A little table at the museum, and it's going to be filled with things that are naturally occurring and possibly very, very dangerous. So you have to come by and check out all the spooky things that can harm you in the environment.
It's going to be so good. I'm so excited. But we're kicking off with today's event, which is also kind of scary, right? We're going to be talking about dangerous minerals. And I'm guessing that you maybe have some dangerous minerals behind you in your little Zoom squares there.
Oh goodness, don't we? Gavin and our picture is from outside of the New Idria mine, just a little way south of of Santa Cruz. And so the New Idria mine is a Cinnabar mine, and that's a source of mercury. So that's one thing that's spooky about it. But Gavin, this yellow stuff behind us, that's not Cinnabar. What is this terrifying substance?
Well, Graham, as is the case for a lot of mine drainages, you get acid mine drainage. So this is a byproduct of that mining. All of those waters that are used for the mining get really acidic, and they drain out from the mine and can cause all sorts of problems. So spooky.
Huh. Is that something that still happens today, or is that kind of like a remnant of an older practice?
That it's most of the time, and especially in this case, it's a remnant of an older practice. And where it does happen, the EPA kind of regulates all of the cleanup. So, but it's still a problem in certain areas. But the EPA
And as groundwater makes their way through the mines and the tailings, it can still pick it up. And so even long after a mine is closed, it can have some acid mine drainage. It's usually most when the mine is active, but yep, over time you can still have mine drainages that are flushed out, not by any mining processes, but just by groundwaters.
Good boy, Graham.
Spooky. All right. Well, on that note, let's hear some more scary geologic occurrences.
Yes. Yes. So that's right. So dangerous minerals, usually we're so excited just talking about geology and all the joys of geology. And so we don't usually spend a lot of time dwelling on just how dangerous some of these minerals can be.
That's right, Graham. Yeah, I mean, there's no better time though. It's fall, it's spooky, it's our favorite time of year. So let's think about times or times and places where geology can be dangerous, especially these dangerous minerals. So Graham, what makes a mineral dangerous?
Yeah, Gavin, that's excuse me. What does make a mineral dangerous? We think about minerals all the time, and there are these dangerous things about minerals. We often talk about like geologic hazards, volcanic eruptions, rock slides, and we know the dangers that fall in with there. But when we get up close to some of these minerals, some of them can in fact be quite dangerous. But what is it that could be so dangerous about these Sierran granites or these beach sands or this outcrop of coal here or the Fall Creek Fault? How is it that these things where we can interact with them and they aren't, toxic, or they aren't, radioactive just as we touch them, that we can have those sorts of hazards arise with them?
Well, Graham, I think that's a great question because you're so right. Most of the time geology is harmless. And so what makes minerals dangerous is when they become concentrated. The vast majority of the times that these harmful properties of these minerals become concentrated are when humans use them for their properties. But Graham, before we run into that, can you just describe to me what I mean to describe to the audience what I mean when I say concentrated.
Yeah, great point question. So when we say concentration, right, we mean taking something and kind of purifying out, taking out just one thing that we're interested in, right? So what we can do is sometimes we can we can dry down something to concentrate it, right? We can boil down that pot of broth to make stock, or we can sometimes buy juice and concentrate, or buy packets of concentrated stuff. And so those concentrates are where we take something and we kind of get all of the stuff we're interested in together. And sometimes that stuff we're interested in can be quite dangerous, like uranium, or like mercury, which we use in thermometers, or used to use in thermometers. Things like lead that used to be added to gasoline and still are used in a lot of industrial applications today, or things like asbestos that we've used to insulate and keep our houses warm or cool in the summer for many, many, many years.
That's right, Graham. So the trouble arises when we take the harmless rock and then we get rid of most of the harmless stuff, and take out just the stuff like the lead in the rock, or the uranium, the mercury in the rock. So when we concentrate it, it gets dangerous. But what kind of dangers are we talking about here? Like, it seems like there's a spectrum, right?
Totally, that's right. And so no, when we say they're dangerous, these rocks aren't going to dress up in a scary costume and run after you. No, these are going to be things like toxicity. So some minerals carry toxic elements or chemicals that are hazardous to our body after we eat them, once we interact with them, touch them, taste them, once they enter into our body through our skin or through our mouths, then they can start causing issues in our bodies by how they interact with our bodies. So some names you might be familiar with that are things like lead, arsenic, and mercury, which are all present in these really trace amounts in the natural environment. But then when we start trying to pull these things out and get a lot of them for industrial applications or for certain chemistries and things like that, that's when they become really dangerous to us and our environment.
That's right, Graham. Yeah, so we have pictures of pipes here and water. I think a theme of this is going to be a lot of times these toxic minerals get into the drinking water. And so for the most part, that's where we run into trouble, right? But what's an example of this? You talked about lead, arsenic, mercury. What kind of minerals are we talking about?
Yeah, that's great. And so let's dive right in and think about some arsenic-rich minerals. And before I let Gavin share with you these awesome arsenic-rich minerals, I'm just going to give you all a heads up to get ready. So we talk about how these things are an issue in water, right? We often worry about these things getting into our drinking water. Well, that also, the way they interact with water and how easily they go into water also tells us something about how they form. So keep your eyes peeled for how these different minerals form, and you might catch a pattern.
That's right, Graham. That's right. I like that little foreshadowing, I guess. So here we're talking about two specifically highly arsenic-rich minerals. That is arsenopyrite, which is an iron arsenic sulfide. So it binds with iron and sulfide, that arsenic. And that's associated with hydrothermal veins. Hydrothermal meaning like very hot fluids, often associated with magma chambers and volcanic activity. So you get these really hot fluids. They kind of are driven up through the crust. They interact with a bunch of rocks and they pull out all of the minerals that are all of the elements rather that are water reactive. And so they often form these very, very weird very, very weird minerals with weird metals like arsenic. And so when you get these sorts of rocks on the surface or minerals on the surface like arsenopyrite and orpiment, which also has a bunch of arsenic, that's when you can get these dangerous properties. And so as I said, or as Graham said, arsenic is often a problem in water. It's not always like a poison like you see it used in the movies. For the most part, it's getting into water. And so this top right picture shows the vast majority of situations, especially closer to home, where arsenic gets into water because it's associated with mining and tailings like the ones we talked about in New Idria. Those are mercury tailings, but often arsenic is a problem in drinking water there too. But Graham, is it always just human induced? Arsenic actually is one of the ones that can occur naturally, right?
That's absolutely right. Yeah. And arsenic just loves being in water so much that in places where you do get a decent amount of arsenic near the surface in rocks like arsenopyrite or orpiment, that can actually get picked up by groundwaters and rainwaters and then go into human drinking water. And so in some parts of the world with really arsenic rich rocks, that can be, arsenic contamination in the water and sort of low level and accumulating chronic arsenic poisoning can be a huge issue for entire communities.
That's right. And a lot of people are working on remediation in those areas, especially in Asia. So yeah, pretty spooky.
I'm afraid of arsenic, I will tell you, but I think one of the things that even gives me greater chills is cinnabar. So this really bright red, warm, cuddly, I almost want to make like a tea out of cinnabar, but that would be a terrible thing to do, Gavin. Why?
You're so right. It's a very fall looking color, right?
Yes.
And we're not the only people to think that. A lot of ancient cultures use cinnabar, but we'll get into that. But you asked me a question: why should we be afraid of cinnabar? And the reason is because it's an ore of mercury. When you look at its chemical formula, it's HGS. That's a mercury sulfide. So it's got a lot of mercury in it, and for that reason, it's often mined for mercury. It's an ore of mercury. And obviously, we know mercury is very, very toxic, especially when concentrated. It can cause mercury poisoning. Graham, can you tell us a little bit about the properties of mercury? Because that's an amazing picture you have right there.
Yeah, I mean, so as toxic as mercury is, it is one of the absolute coolest elements. It is on Earth. So at the temperatures and pressures of the surface of the Earth, mercury is a metal and a liquid. So it flows like water, but it has all of the properties of metal like copper or iron, right? So it's shiny, it's metallic, you can run electricity through it. It's very, very dense. So it pours like water, but it's denser than iron. And so it's this really just absolutely kind of, it's almost like, it feels like alien, even though it's a part of the, it comes from this earth. It's just so unlike most of the matter we're used to interacting with. So it's this very interesting liquid metal, and all these awesome properties come along with it in things like electronics. It used to be used in thermometers. That's where it's best known. But because it's got all these cool properties, it's been used really widely. So people for a long time have been hunting after cinnabar and trying to get mercury out of it.
That's right. Yeah. Ancient cultures used it as pigment and paints. Actually, the Ohlone culture from our neck of the woods in Santa Cruz used it for paint because it's so beautiful and red. And it's no coincidence they used it, because there's a lot of cinnabar around California. Some of the most productive mercury mines in the world come from California. And specifically the New Idria mine that we talked about close to us here, but also the New Almondin mine. That's the picture we have in the bottom middle there. You could see that amazingly red cinnabar. That's a mercury mine. And so as we said, it's got industrial uses, but it's also can be kind of dangerous and spooky.
That's right. Okay, so another silvery looking mineral here, or actually our first really silvery looking mineral, this is galena, or lead glance. So a lot like cinnabar, it's a sulfide. So, but instead of mercury, that's lead. That Pb is lead bound with the sulfide. And so galena is a very popular ore mineral because it gives us both lead and silver. And silver we use both for its uses in electronics, and it's as one of our precious metals. But then lead is also really useful in all sorts of industrial and electronic applications as well. And so, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to also remind the audience that this is also a hydrothermal mineral, along with the cinnabar and the arsenic minerals. All of these form in hydrothermal veins and in hydrothermal basically rocks. So yeah, that's where you get all these weird possibly dangerous minerals. So, but go on, Graham. You're going to talk about the harmful properties of galena. Why is it harmful?
Yeah, and so galena on its own, I wouldn't eat a crystal of galena, but I wouldn't eat gravel off the ground either. Where galena starts to become really dangerous is when you start purifying lead out of it. And lead has been used as a metal and as an additive to all sorts of things for thousands of years. So the Romans used lead to make water pipes, because it's so easy to shape and mold into those pipes. But what we've realized in the last 100 years or so is just how toxic lead can be. And lead really readily goes into water. And so lead, as it gets into water, or lead that's been incorporated into old paint, it used to be that lead was put into gasoline. But lead, if it gets into our bodies, it's super, super toxic. And it damages every organ system, especially the nervous system. So it'll kind of make all parts of your body fail, but it particularly acts your nerves and your brain. And lead poisoning is still a huge cause, is still, really prevalent, because lead is still used in so many things. And so it accounts for hundreds of thousands of deaths every year still. And so lead poisoning, and lead is almost all mined out of galena, or it's all extracted from galena ores, is still a really quite a frightening continuing toxic mineral story.
Oh, Graham, we got to be careful with that lead for all of its good properties.
That's right. As useful as it is in so many things, so many of the things we use every day, we do need to be mindful of how it's making its way back into our waterways and things like that. And so we covered some of these, pretty well-known, rather frightening minerals, but this one, I think, is the creepiest of them all. Gavin, this is Hutchinsonite. And what kind of nasty chemicals do we find in here?
I'm not going to lie to you, Graham. Before we were talking about these dangerous minerals, I hadn't heard of Hutchinsonite, but it's kind of like a trash can for all of these very, very dangerous elements that go into one single mineral. So this is a lead arsenic sulfide, right? That's pretty spooky. It's got all of these properties in one. Again, hydrothermal. So we can most of the time, all of these dangerous metals are going to come in hydrothermal systems, but it's got those toxic metals, lead, toxic metals, arsenic. Oh, I didn't even touch on the thallium. That's another highly toxic one that could fit into this chemical structure. So that's pretty dangerous and pretty spooky. But Graham, what's this poison?
That's right. So thallium, which is one of the constituents of Hutchinsonite, is it's very toxic, it's tasteless and odorless, and it's commonly used in rat poisons. Most of those rat poisons have been banned in many countries. A few countries still allow it, but one of the big reasons it was banned is because this thallium rat poisoning was being used as a murder weapon too often. So these thallium salts are very toxic. And so before it got banned, thallium took on the nickname the poisoner's poison and inheritance powder. And so one of the main ways to get thallium is out of this Hutchinsonite, which are these silver bars that are around this arsenic-rich orpiment.
Yeah, so they're all of these dangerous minerals are often associated with one another.
That's right. That's right. So Gavin, do you think we've covered some of our toxic minerals? Should we look at some other ways minerals can be dangerous?
My gosh, Graham, the toxic minerals aren't enough for you. This is pretty spooky, but I think we should move on. What do you think?
I think we should. We've got at least 10 more minutes to frighten our audience. So let's go to when minerals attack. So this is when minerals start to use physical damage. And this almost always happens by inhaling them, right? So of course we know a rock can fall down on us, but we're talking about minerals today. And so inhalation hazards are a major, source of ways that these minerals can be dangerous in a physical way.
That's right, Graham. Yeah, maybe before I became a geologist, I probably didn't even realize this, but if you were a miner or you worked in mining, this is a huge deal. Like the black lung, of course, the black lung for coal miners. when you get coal dust in your lungs. And then maybe a less well-known one, but probably just as prevalent, is silicosis, right? These minerals get into your lungs and your body attacks them, and it can cause serious problems, huh?
That's right. So these fine dusts and these powders and grits get into our lungs, and they start to irritate the lungs, and the body tries to fight them like they're a disease, and that will ramp up the irritation, and it can't ever really fix itself because these aren't bacteria or viruses. And so it ends up causing a ton of damage to lung tissue. And so this black lung and silicosis are really common among coal miners, especially before folks started to do more to try and prevent them from happening. And one of the reasons that silicosis and black lung happen together is because coal is often found right next to sandstone. So you need to dig through sandstones to get to coal. Because Gavin, how do we even form coal?
Well, that's a great question, Grant. It forms in swamps, basically, and in low-lying wetlands. So when you get a bunch of plants and organic material basically piled on top of one another in big, thick layers, and there's not a lot of oxygen around, so you're not breaking down those organics, you get coal. That's why it's often associated with ancient swamps. But you're right. They form together, and they both have the problem of forming dusts when you dig them out, right?
Yep, that's right. And so coal will often form in these shallow swampy areas. And then as sea levels change over geologic history, those swamps will drain and you get these estuary-like areas, or these areas that are kind of coastal and beachy. And so throughout a lot of Earth history, you often see areas switching between swamps and these sort of broad sandy plains. And so that's why we get these sandwich layers of coal and sand. And so coal miners will need to dig through all of this, kick up all this silica dust and all this coal dust in order to get to the coal that we use to help generate power.
Huh, that's an amazing outcrop right there. What a picture.
Isn't that?
It illustrates it so perfectly. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I thought this was rather lovely, a lovely coal seam. And I like that it's still in the rock.
That's right, where it should have stayed, but
yes.
Let's get into that.
And so black lung and silicosis aren't the only lung disease that can also happen, because there's another kind of mineral that's really dangerous to your lungs, and that's asbestos. And so this comes from asbestiform minerals. Asbestos are these fine, sharp little mineral crystals, and asbestosis results from inhaling lots of these asbestos crystals. So Gavin, what are these two asbestiform minerals?
Well, Graham, crocodolite. How do you say that? I
don't actually know. I was hoping you would know better than I do. Crocodolite or crocodolite?
And chrysotile or chrysotile. Yes. Yeah. So these are amazingly naturally forming. So what happens is that you get these crystals that form these very, very, very tiny fibers. This is actually a crystal structure. And so I like that you put in these really fine images, these SEM images, or scanning electron microscope images. So those are very small. I don't know what the scale is, but it must be microns, a millionth of a meter.
Yeah, so this one here, this little bar is 5 microns, and that's about 1/6 the width of a strand of hair.
Wow. So really small, but it occurs naturally, and it gets these fibers. You can see in both of these hand samples here, you get these very fibrous properties. And so folks have realized that you can use that for insulation. And that's why asbestos is a really often in old houses and stuff is a big problem, because the old way to insulate a house was with these asbestiform minerals, because it can help the house retain heat. But when it gets kind of disturbed up, all of those asbestiform minerals get into the air, because they're very, very small, and so they can be disturbed up into the air, and you can inhale them, and it's a problem for your lungs, just like silicosis and black lung.
Yeah, that's right. And so this is one that's also a little bit close to home, because chrysotile is a serpentinite group mineral. And we know that we've got serpentinite all over the coast of California, but we don't need to worry, because not all of them are full of asbestos and are going to hurt us. And the best way to be sure of this is when we find a piece of serpentinite, if it's got a nice, smooth, blocky surface, we're doing well. And if it's really fibrous and fluffy, it's good to just set that rock down and let it be. Asbestosis comes from a lot of prolonged exposure, but the best thing you can do is just limit your exposure to it.
Yeah, I think you're right, Graham, and it's good to handle it with care. The disclaimer is that even in an asbestiform piece of serpentinite, you probably won't generate as many of those fibers, but I agree with you. Let's just put that one down. There's enough serpentinite that's not asbestiform and is really beautiful that we can handle.
That's right. All right, Gavin. So we looked at when minerals attack, and now one that I know as radioisotope geochemists, we are particularly interested in. Gavin, talk to me about radioactivity in minerals.
You're right, Graham, and I am. I'm gonna admit it. I'm biased towards this danger because it's really, really interesting. It's super dangerous, but radioactivity in minerals. So how does that work? So what we know about rocks is that they all have, or most of them have, very, very minute amounts of radioactive elements that will break down. They're unstable, and because they're unstable, they're radioactive. They have radiation associated with them, and so yes, these occur in trace amounts in a lot of rocks and minerals and are often harmless. But sometimes you have minerals that have a high concentration of these radioactive elements. The highest occurrence is uranium. So you get these minerals that are really high in uranium, and in large doses, this can make you sick. It could cause radiation sickness and skin irritations. But the most famous times when this is really harmful is when we mine out this uranium, which are these two pictures here on the left. These are old uranium mines where people found naturally occurring high uranium minerals on the surface of the earth, and they mined it out because we use uranium and its radioactive properties for the nuclear industry. And so this on the bottom right, that's a piece of enriched uranium where we took all the uranium out of the rock and we concentrated it for its nuclear properties. So Graham, what's an example of a mineral that's really high in uranium that occurs naturally?
Yeah, so it's the aptly named uraninite. So it's a uranium oxide. So most of this mineral is uranium. It's just uranium and oxide. It's our sort of most productive uranium ore. And because of all this uranium, it can contain high levels of other really radioactive elements that are the daughter products of uranium decay. And so Gavin, usually, we can handle pitch blende. Like, again, I wouldn't eat a piece of pitch blende, but it's not super hazardous just when it's in the rock. What then makes it really hazardous?
That's right. This is sort of a common theme to all of these dangerous minerals, is that when we want their properties for other things like nuclear reactors and things, we concentrate them out of the rock. So as you said, if I picked this up, I'd probably put it down pretty quickly, but it wouldn't kill me. But what happens is that we process this uranium in the pitch blende or in the uraninite, and we make stuff called yellow cake, which there's a picture of it down here. Yep, on the bottom left where Graham's cursor is. So that is the processed uranium ore. And from there, we either take it and we use it for its properties, like in the top right. This is a famous uranium daughter product called radium. And it's famous because it glows. This is just a big pile of it. It glows green like this. And in the early 1900s, it was used for its glowing properties in things like watches and glass. But what we didn't really know as much is that it's very highly radioactive. And so you can get radiation poisoning from this radium. When else, Graham? I think the Chernobyl disaster is a very famous time for when the radiation in uranium, especially enriched uranium, can be very dangerous, right?
That's right. And so, yeah, one of the biggest places, one of the most common uses, most of the uranium that is mined often ends up going into nuclear processes and nuclear power generation processes. So they go into nuclear reactors and They're also still used in weapons productions and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of the, as awesome as uranium is as a scientific tool, right? We use it to help measure time in geologic processes. It also has this sort of spooky and very dangerous other side that it's used for in most of the world.
That's right.
And so that's to give us some chills thinking about uranium.
Mhm.
And is that it, Gavin? Have we covered all the frightening things out there?
I think, well, maybe not all, but
Not all of them. Fair enough. You've caught me there.
These are the big three, right? These, when you think of really, really dangerous minerals, the toxicity, the mechanical problems you can get by breathing them in, and then the radiation are the big three dangers when it comes to naturally occurring minerals on the surface of the earth. So I don't know, Graham, that's pretty spooky to me.
That is enough for me. Quite frankly, it's rather ghastly, and I have chills. I am ready for Halloween. I am feeling the fright.
That's right.
Well, don't you all worry, because next month we won't be quite so frightening, and we will ease into November by enjoying the motions of the oceans and the atmosphere.
That's right, Graham. Surface processes on the earth that aren't dangerous, but are equally as interesting and entertaining. How the oceans circulate and the atmosphere circulate is really, really fundamental to how the earth works and how it changes through time. So I'm so excited for this. And maybe you and I will just do it from hot air balloons. What better vantage point?
I hope so. We'll just be cruising on the currents of the oceans and the air. And I could not be happier with that.
That sounds good, Graham. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm gonna hold you guys to that. I don't know the logistics of it. We'll make it happen. But thanks. That was indeed terrifying. And I'm excited to kind of delve into some of these topics a little bit more with Gavin during our Halloween event on October 30th. So I'm just going to really quickly give you all a little taste of what that's going to be. It's Museum of the Macabre. We've done it. This will be our 5th iteration of this event. And this year, the theme is potions, poisons, and plants. So we have a lot of exciting things planned, including deeper exploration of some toxic naturally occurring things all around you and shocking things that can kill you. Right. So what's not to love? Well, thank you as always, Gavin and Graham. I can't wait for what sounds like a breath of fresh air in November. But for now, we're going to keep things a little unsettling, which I think is what we all want.
Yes.
This October. Yeah. All right. Well, see you all soon. Thanks.